I welcome in the final Saturday of the regular season NBA Deeper Dive here on Awesemo. Red Pack is in the house. Tyler's producing. I'm Eytan. So the three of us welcome you in. We appreciate you as always. Now, this is going to be a little different than normal. We're not jammed with a ton of games, and even these games have minimal to no to maybe some heavy significance. But clearly, as things have kind of wrapped up for some teams, others still fighting, we'll sift through all of that, try to find you some value. And look, even if a big name is out or two, it doesn't mean that nobody's out there playing. That's why Rinpack is in the house. Now, did you smash anything last night before the chat opens up? And congrats on anything. Do we owe you any preemptive congratulations from last night?
No. Nothing really. I did not have enough of Khaled Zykis of Oklahoma City Thunder. So your typical early April NBA basketball DFS not having enough of some, probably the worst player in the league, just lighting it up against the Lakers. Go figure. But this is our final Saturday show. This is the farewell, I guess, our farewell to the NBA regular season.
Correct, my friend. So do you have anything special cooked up here, or any lighting effects that you have? Is there anything here that you have as far as the final Saturday, like a goodbye or anything like that for us?
Maybe we got to stay tuned, right?
That's goodbye shot,
teeth, right?
Now, I know we've been doing the show early, like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. So the one show you and I did, it was late, where you were taking a couple of shooters towards the end of the show. I think it was whiskey, right? I don't want to mislabel your booze here by any means.
Yeah. Maybe we can take a few shots.
That's early, though. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, they say day drinking is better than night drinking nowadays, right?
Look, I think the entire program here would love the fact if you just started whipping out halfway through at 4:30 East Coast some shots of whiskey. I just didn't want to push you into day drinking. That's all. That was my whole thing.
We'll see how it goes. Yeah, it's early. It's a little too early for my liking, but I could do it for the audience.
See, look at that. Josh of Los Angeles. Rinpack special ceiling lights are sick. Absolutely. Club Rinpack in the house. So you know it. Love it, man. All right. So Underdog's our sponsor. We're going to tell you a lot about what's going on with Underdog coming up. Let's just look. We've got 3 games, and with that Sacramento Clippers game still kind of looming there, we also have to get through with this Warriors Spurs game in the middle. We'll start in Memphis with not much, at least from the Grizzlies side. But overall, you mentioned last night and kind of hinting at my question here and the answer to it, Rinpack. But if you can expand even deeper on it, that's fine. Where the strategy, I'm sure, today changes drastically from last week, from 2 weeks ago, from 3 weeks ago, even on a 3-game slate where you're trying to identify guys that maybe are sporadic in their minutes or maybe have just been jettisoned into the starting lineup because 4 or 5 people above them are hurt, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And just looking at some important, I guess, from the aerial view of what's happening. New Orleans is taking on the Grizzlies. New Orleans is we're waiting on Brandon Ingram news on his side of things. They seem pretty locked up where they are. Memphis also seems pretty locked up what they are, but they are getting the return of Ja Morant today, which only helps Ja Morant and no one else on the team, as we clearly saw by the record that they put up. So that makes things a lot less appealing in that game. The next game, we got Golden State and San Antonio. San Antonio will not have, I guess, DeJounte Murray somehow lost 10 pounds during his sickness, so he won't be able to play today. And we're going to be without some of their other players, such as Devin Vassell is not going to be there. Keldon Johnson's not going to be there. And that's going to be another place to look at. And Golden State is kind of, I guess, not mailing this game in, but Clay's not going to play today. And Jordan Poole is questionable, which is really big news. If we get that news beforehand, that will change some things. In the last game of the night, no seeding implications. It's just that Ty Lue wants Paul George and Norm Powell to get some chemistry going together before their play-in game. In Sacramento, they're just tanking. So that's all I think what's happening in terms of an aerial view. Is there something else that you've noticed in terms of an aerial view among these 6 teams?
No, and in fact, Rasa was sniffing out, at least trying to sniff out a couple of 3-point props for me earlier in the day. And I told him, I said, look, I have so little feel. I mean, I got burned on a 4-legger because Tobias Harris only hit 1, not 2 today. Neither here nor there. But I think it's just so difficult in general. And even with, and specifically because I've been watching them the last couple of games here, the Charlotte Hornets, a team like kind of winding down with Bridges and Ball, just seeing how rotations can shift late in games where maybe normally it's a guy out there, 2 starters out there with 3 subs. And then next game, because things are so volatile, he's on the bench and it's another starter that's there. It's nothing really consistent right now. So I'm actually leaning on you a lot, and I'm going to build some tickets as we talk, and I'll throw some tickets out at you here. But no, unlike what we've seen for really this entire season, you and I have been doing these shows on the weekend, man. I don't have much feel at all. I mean, I'm going to identify a couple of shooters, don't get me wrong, but I don't know yet until I hear from you as far as, where you project minutes, where you project as far as just rotation, things like that. I'm going to try and build my ticket. Similarly to how a lot of people here are going to build their DFS lineups hearing you.
Yeah, and we'll see. And I do think there are some places to target some rotations that are up in the uncertainty where I guess we can be ahead of the field in certain aspects of things. And it's going to be interesting. There is some significant news, and the news weighs a bit more when there are less games on the slate. And it has more meaning to the slate when there's less games on a slate. And there's only 3 today. So the news is very important on how we go upon our process and how we handle it, even in April. News is even more important, I think, on shorter slates than larger slates. But looking at it, I'm really waiting on I do think Morant's going to play. The Ingram news and Jordan Poole news is pretty significant for me. And those are the 2 only pieces of news we have, but they will change a lot for the slate, I think.
All right, so let's dive into this first game. And again, we'll sprinkle some stuff in here. We may have to open up like an AMA for Rinpack on the final day, right? Just ARA, ask Rinpack anything.
We might need to. Yeah, we might need to kill some time. Yeah, I'm open to that.
All right, brother. So let's dive in. Memphis will hit in a second, but the Pelicans 6.5 point, again, depending on how you're looking at this with Morant, and still have questionable as of right now, right? Or did you see something that officially puts him in? I know we're about 2 hours away, just over, or pardon me, under. So things will change.
Yeah, I do think we've gone word with Morant with the way the news has gone for him being questionable, upgraded to questionable. A lot of things indicate personally, just from different beat reporting, different coach speak about Morant playing, getting a game under his belt, and then potentially resting tomorrow. So we'll see what ends up happening. It makes sense, Morant, to get there. Morant coming off a lower body injury, a knee injury, where I do think it was pretty significant. I know the team was rolling and they were being cautious with him. I don't expect full minutes, and that just like really makes the rotation tough to predict. I think Morant gets at least mid-20s minutes. He can get up to 30. Anything above 30, I'm like, all right, this guy is just getting like a dress rehearsal in for the playoffs. But the way they're priced right now, it's tough to go to anyone on really Memphis in any sort of confidence just because of Morant being there. Morant just sucks up so much of the usage. As we just saw amazing basketball poetry with this team without Morant for 2.5 months, we're not going to see that anymore. We're going to go back to Morant being the steal of the show, and he's definitely going to be that. And it doesn't really help anyone on this team. And if you were to tell me, if I was building one lineup and I don't have a Memphis Grizzly on there, I'm fine with it. It's tough to go there in confidence, and I do think games and teams and later in the night, I do think I can have more confidence in where the minutes are going to be and where I can expose certain price tags.
Makes sense, especially because even you mentioned, even if he's out there, the depth of minutes are not really secure right now, even if it's, or maybe especially if it's that tune-up with it. So on the Pelicans side here, McCollum is catching a ton of ownership tonight, 8,200 on DK. I guess we can start there, kind of move to Ingram, who's also questionable, mind you. So we have to kind of work through that. But with the Pelicans, those 2 guys are going to jump out as far as the ones that are really taking the majority of ownership, high single digit, but maybe there's a cheaper option in Herbert Jones for you. For the most part, though, it's CJ and Ingram.
Correct. CJ and Ingram. And if Ingram is out, I like Valanciunas as well in the center spot where we only have one.
That's my fault. I breezed right by him. He's number 1. Let me just clarify that. That's on me. He's the number 1 guy of the Pelicans. So, yes, Valanciunas is catching 47% we have projected. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I think that's completely fine. Not many strong centers on this slate whatsoever. And you just lock up the raw points with Joe Val. makes a lot of sense to me. And here is another, like, I like the big three if they're playing. I like McCollum and Valanciunas even more if Brandon Ingram's out. And I just don't have much confidence in anyone else, really, just because there are so many other guys priced better on in Golden State and San Antonio. And there's no secret there. The field's going to be there as well. And I think that just makes the most sense. I would like to get this news at least sometime before the game with what they do with Ingram. But I like McCollum on both sites. I think he's a solid option on FanDuel, 8,300, 8,200. Even Valanciunas makes a lot of sense. And for sure, Valanciunas can be the highest scoring among this three if they're all going to play. And I just like the upside for a little bit more. So give me Valanciunas and McCollum. And if Ingram goes, I think you can play him, but be cautious. It is a hamstring injury.
So if Ingram goes, how much are you limited then on Valanciunas and McCollum simply because Ingram is playing through injury? He's going to be out there and might just suck up a little bit of either or maybe both of those guys' volume.
Yeah, I will. So if Ingram is in, I'll still get to these guys significantly just because of their upside in a 3-game slate. That's what I want to target. They can both put up 45, not at the same game, but one of them certainly can. Now, if Ingram is out, these two guys become a priority for me. In McCollum and Valanciunas, there's enough value to get to them, and it seems well worth to take my chances with their two studs. And the usage and the minutes, we've seen the rotation change up a little bit even more with the insertion of Larry Nance now, where minutes have dropped for some of these guys, especially Jackson Hayes. His minutes have gone down a little bit. Herb Jones, FanDuel, where you're getting bonus points for steals and blocks. I believe he led the league in steals and blocks combined this season. I'm not sure. I could be wrong here, but someone in chat wants to confirm. I saw a bunch of graphics going around that this guy was up there in one of the top guys in getting steals and blocks. So makes FanDuel Yahoo scoring very preferable for Herb Jones. Not a guy I tend to go in any sort of way, but on a 3-game slate, you got to give him some sort of honorable mention.
Yeah, I was just looking at that really quick there. And chat's going to have to find it.
Yeah,
because it makes sense, though. So league leader in stocks. Yeah, I don't have that up. All right, we'll find that there. But that's, again, 40. You mentioned the price tag alone on DK FanDuel for him. Is there anybody else that, and again, we've got 3 games, right? So 6 teams on a short slate that's already watered down with injury and tanking alike. You mentioned Larry Nance, 2.6% ownership we have projected on DK at that $3,500 ticket. So maybe if you're scraping, but I mean, Devontae Graham, are you even looking at these guys if you're building 100, 150 lineups tonight?
You can sprinkle in if you want to get a little cute with Devontae Graham, but it seems unnecessary. Graham, where you get a 3-point bonus, he's probably going to be out there shooting threes. He's 4K on a 3-game slate. Can he backdoor his way to 20 points off, like, let's say 3 or 4 made threes and gets a steal or 2 there? You really need him to run hot at a 4K price tag, and he can do it on a 3-game slate. But the minutes are like never going to be above 20. It seems like, unless if there's an injury or a blowout. So it doesn't seem as appealing to me. But Graham would be the guy, a ball handler off the bench. Larry Nance isn't all that crazy. He's only $3,500, power forward only on DK. We've seen his minutes be around 2021, high teens to low 20s. So Nance, you just need him to shoot effectively when he's on the floor, and you really want to make sure he gets those rebounds along the way. But 3,500. There's some other guys priced this cheap that are much better in San Antonio. I personally think so.
All right, so we'll keep it moving there and flip it a little deeper on Memphis. You referenced there as far as just getting to a couple of guys, and we'll just counter it. How you feel versus the field. That's another way to kind of look at it too. Here is look at where the field is, and they get Rinpack's thoughts on the field play. How much do you think you're going to get from CJ tonight? Because the number over 2.5 makes. Minus 120 is a fine number for me to play this, where outside of that one little blip of a bad game in Sacramento, this month he's been shooting the ball pretty well. But again, I mean, if he's going to be out there for 25, 26 minutes, I'm not touching anybody in this game. But if you think I can get to 30, 32 minutes from CJ, that should be enough to get me 3 makes.
I think so too. And CJ McCollum is one of those guys who I believe has not gotten enough credit for how well he has been playing as a member of the Pelicans. and he is showing that he could be a lead ball handler. And I like 3+ threes, what you got. And I do think we're going to get one last run from these guys tonight. And yeah, I like McCollum tonight in terms of the betting perspective and DFS wise.
Okay. Now you can always. Herbert Jones has been stuck at a half three, and you're laying like 192, 200, something like that. So it's always like a nice little same game piece, right? Like you could. I'm just curious what 2 makes for CJ, 1 make for Herbert Jones get you. Minus 109. I mean, that's not terrible. A minus
no, it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I like CJ on an island.
Okay. I'm not pushing it. All right.
I'm just not a big. I know Herb Jones being called the steal of the draft, and he's been a shocker to me personally as well this season. And I just not a guy who I think is on there for his offensive prowess by any means.
Yep.
And if I'll like it, I'll like the Herb Jones prop if Ingram is out. We won't know until then, and probably the line will be off by then. So keep an eye on that. If Ingram's out, I think you can definitely take your chances with Herb then.
All right, my friend. So let's move on. Memphis, and just looking at where the field is here, so much of this is predicated on Ja Morant, and we get that. Desmond Bane, though, however, the 6,800 tag DK, he's catching some pretty significant ownership right now at 22%. Brooks behind him. Now it's a little cheaper at 5,700, so you can save a little bit there with Brooks, but again, similar ownership percentage as well, about 20% or so. And then you have JJJ coming in around 15. So the field is even kind of up in the air with Morant. The field is getting to a couple of people here on this team. I just don't know how excited you are about that.
I'm not. It's just that when you get it's not just one guy coming back into the rotation. It's like Ja Morant's coming back in.
Yeah.
And the guys just, I think, will just want to get his feet wet, get the offensive game going under his belt, get some shots up, and it's not going to help anyone on Memphis we were riding this team for a long time when he was out because they were so underpriced. And him coming back just doesn't make things that appealing. Sure, if you were to tell me one guy gets there outside of with Morant playing, sure. I just don't know in confidence. I just don't know. Just because of the minutes are very, very tough to predict what the rotation is going to look like. If we get some notes from Taylor Jenkins, Morant's only going to play 24 minutes, then sure, will I be willing to take some chances on a Bane or Brooks in some sort of quantity? Yeah. But if Morant's going to play 30 minutes even, that's like a ton of minutes where he's going to come back and it just takes away from the upside from these guys. And it's a 3-game slate where we should be able to take at least a chance on one of these guys. And I just don't know which one because it's Ja Morant who's coming back. And I just don't like to go into this team at this moment.
If for whatever reason Morant is out, and it looks like you're right, he's trending towards playing, and we're not saying that he's in officially or out officially. That's the news god's job. He's lurking. I saw him already right away put out a message there on the chat. By the way, he's been on fire on the betting Discord. So if you're not a part of that, my goodness, click that link below and we'll tell you a little bit more about it. But look, as far as, let's just look at this from a small hypothetical in the event that he's GTD and scratched really late. How much does that change your approach here in this game? We do have a decent total. Some of that is probably implied with Morant's return here, but hypothetically, Rinpack, Morant is ruled out. How much does that change your approach with Memphis?
It changes a decent amount. I think we just go back to some of these guys, and I think that will be a little bit lower owned just because I think a lot of people are approaching it with Morant in, and that's going to give me interest in guys like Triple J, Dylan Brooks, Desmond Bane. You can even sprinkle in some Tyus Jones, but in that order, honestly, it'd be probably Triple J, Brooks, and then Bane is how I would attack it. And then Tyus Jones as well. I do prefer his younger brother just because you're saving some money, but I do think these guys will become solid options if Morant is out. Just targeting their price tags, it makes a lot of sense to take some chances on Triple J and Brooks and get the savings there a little bit off of Bane, but Bane's been pretty awesome himself as well.
Yeah. All right. So good to look at it again from that standpoint. With Morant himself, I mean, that's just going to be so key here. And we can kind of look at that from, I guess, the backdrop when we move on for some other games. All right. So anybody else in this at all here that you want to hit? Again, I only have 3 guys available on most of these books. So a lot of people are waiting for Morant news to come down, and maybe you can attack somebody on the Memphis side. But the only thing I have locked in right now is our CJ play. And I say R, okay? Hopefully you're okay with that.
I'm good with that. Hey, I mean, last Saturday, that Clay 5+3s.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, here I am asking you if you smashed anything last night, because that's usually the norm. When we start a show, we've got 6 people already being like, yo, Red Pack, congrats. But yeah, how about that last week? Right? I think everything hit, including whatever the bet was that I went to, and then you talked me out of. The Clay one hit, that one hit, the same game parlays hit. I'm sure you made people a ton of money on the DFS side as well. Like, no show could say that they made people that much money like we did last weekend.
Yeah, no, that was straight fire across the board.
Play 5.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. But now we are done with the Golden State taking on the Spurs side of things. No Clay here tonight. Unfortunately, we can't take that same prop. But this is some big news that we're waiting on with Jordan Poole. Jordan Poole has been pretty amazing. I think he could be a dark horse, most improved player of the year winner. I do have some bias there personally, just because he went to Michigan and gave me one of the best March Madness moments when he took down Houston from half court to buzzer beater. But Jordan Poole has always been a fun college player. I never expected him to grow into a rotational NBA player, let alone be drafted in the first round. But when Jordan Poole plays, he looks pretty awesome. Now he's questionable. Now, with him being questionable, if he were to be out, I think the biggest bump will be to guys like Andrew Wiggins, Gary Payton II. I think we can all go to. Now, if Jordan Poole is out, who will start in the guard spot? I think Gary Payton will get a jump up regardless in the starting lineup with no Klay Thompson. And then maybe we see, maybe they go big and put in Kuminga. Maybe they go small and put in Moody. So it's a lot of moving parts if Jordan Poole is out, because we have not dealt with this situation in a while. Jordan Poole has been pretty much playing a ton of games of late. And with that being said, I really like Andrew Wiggins as is.
Yeah.
With or without Jordan Poole, I like the price tag for him. So give me some Andrew Wiggins. He looks pretty good if Jordan Poole is out. And if for some reason we get it's going to be tough to pinpoint who's going to start. We might even get a Chris Chiozza starting out of the blue if there is no Jordan Poole. So keep an eye on that. My inclination is I think they might just have Gary Payton do some ball handling duty, or have Draymond just run the point for a little bit, or we might even see Iguodala. So it's a lot going up there in the rotation. So I'm not sure what will happen in the starting lineup. And Poole being ruled out will drastically help a bunch of guys in Golden State who'll become immediate value options. I don't have much interest in Kevon Looney. He is trying to get that 82nd gameplay, which he probably will. Just coming back, they just had so many injuries to start off his career, and now he's being able to play 82 games. I think he was determined to do so. But if, like I said, going back to if Poole were out, it'll help Peyton, it'll help Wiggins. Draymond, it is what it is. He looks like okay play as of now, but Wiggins will become a priority if there's no Jordan Poole.
All right, and we should look at the field right now and see if there is maybe a number for you, maybe the breaking point when it comes to ownership for Poole. Just a quick update here. Thanks to the news god setting this my way. Coach Jenkins is here. Ja Morant is a game time decision, but Jenkins is hopeful that Ja will play. So appreciate news guys sending over that tweet. So it does look like as we continue to talk and get closer to lock, and again, you're going to have live before lock, Greg, LaMarca going to come your way next anyway. So once that news comes down, you're going to be fully prepared for it. But as Rinpack hinted, and now reinforced by news god, it does look like we are trending towards Ja Morant playing, which is definitely going to impact significantly what you laid out with Memphis. But with Jordan Poole right now, 60.5% is where the field. And again, we bring this up because of the short slate, 3 teams. You're not really looking at maybe 3 games with 6 teams equally. Is there a number where you look at Jordan Poole, assuming he's active, where it's like, all right, I can't be equal or over to the field if Poole is at 65 or 70%? He's not there yet, but I'm looking at a number that maybe you look at in your mind and say, yeah, that might be too much. Or maybe it just doesn't work because we have such a short slate.
Yeah, I do think that's a little too much on this slate. I do think I'd take my chances with everyone else, but with no Klay Thompson being there, yeah, it makes sense to fall on him, but proceed with a little bit of caution, I'd say. I mean, just because I just think there is massive benefit if people are probably going to build lineups with Poole in, but I mean, he was ruled questionable later on in the day, so I think it's a midday downgrade, and this team is playing again tomorrow. I personally would like him to be out so we can take advantage of the situation with some news, but I do understand if you do want to play him, he looks outstanding. I do think if you play both him and McCollum, that's fine. I think McCollum is an excellent pivot off of Jordan Poole. I know you have to spend a little bit more, but there's plenty of salary to make that happen. So hey, just keep an eye on that news until we get it. And then I think you can make that decision with more just data and more information that we have, and our projections will update pretty much on the fly as soon as we get it. So it's going to be it'll be interesting to see who will start if Jordan Poole is out. That's going to boost those guys tremendously, whoever starts.
Do you see yourself, maybe it's if you're building more, but do you see yourself getting to a backcourt of McCollum and Poole?
Yeah, I definitely think that's possible on FanDuel for sure. I mean, Jordan Poole is $7,900 there, and McCollum's only $8,300. Plenty of value to do so.
But not on DK where you're spending up a little more?
I do think you can. I just think some of these guys don't have multi-position eligibility. That'd be nice. Like, you can only play Paul George at shooting guard only, and that's kind of annoying. I would like to play him in one of the forward spots today, but we can't do so at the moment. So I got to wait on this Jordan Poole news. We have a ton of great value on the slate, so you can pretty much play whoever you want with the value that we have. So with Poole being out, I just don't think I think people will mess up Golden State by a decent amount.
Yeah, and looking at where we have some pretty strong projected rostership here on our main slate projections, it's not just Wiggins who you referenced there, but Draymond catching about 26% and Otto Porter Jr. catching about 24%. So looking at those guys with the percentage, and I'm looking on DK right now, do you see yourself anywhere near that number, maybe a little light to them?
I think a little bit light to them. And this is going to change drastically with the news of Jordan Poole.
Sure. I guess you could look at it one way or the other, right? If Poole's in versus if Poole's out.
Yeah, if Poole's out, I'll have a significant amount of interest in these guys for sure. And I just want to keep an eye on what Steve Kerr says beforehand. Like, hey, maybe these guys are going to be a little light on the minutes or something like that. Keep an eye on those news points. It's helped out over the past week, and I think just keeping an eye on that. I do think if Jordan Poole's in, it only helps him and not anyone else. So that's the only concern that we're dealing with. Just Poole is just controlling so much of the slate. I kind of hope that he's out so people can't really late swap perfectly or quote unquote optimally with him being in. So that news is going to be pretty much the biggest indicator on the slate because he is garnering so much ownership across the board, but rightfully so.
Right. And that's the thing is so much of this absolutely changes and moves around. Yeah, Frankie Rodriguez with an interesting question here because of where Memphis is and with the anticipation, of course, that John Morant is playing. Do you think they win this game? I mean, look, you said New Orleans has one last hurrah, I think was the term you used, right? Like one last shot that they may have or push, whatever the phrase was. So if Memphis is pulling back a little bit, 6.5, I'm not advocating that people take the money line with the Pelicans, but do you think New Orleans wins that game?
Does New Orleans win that game? Memphis is 5.5 point favorites. New Orleans wins that game if Brandon Ingram plays, I think.
Yeah, okay. I'll buy that. Maybe you jump in now with the anticipation that Ingram is in.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to take the points either way. You can't play this thing straight up, right?
Yeah, I got to take the points. Yeah.
You have to take the points.
I definitely got to take the points here. But yeah, it's an interesting situation here to deal with. Yeah, I do think I do think New Orleans can win this game. I just don't know what the chemistry will look like with Morant just coming back, thrown in the fray. As the team was playing so well without it. That's the thing. Right. It's kind of like I've talked about like the Ewing theory, but the Morant postulate has been like pretty impressive for this Memphis team. And to the point where I'm like, maybe they are better without him. I don't know if I mean, obviously you want John Morant in the playoffs, but John Morant's definitely one of the young stars. But it was pretty impressive how well they played without him. I don't care. They're beating a healthy Phoenix team. They're beating amazing teams throughout the stretch. So I was pretty amazed to see that. And definitely the biggest surprise in the NBA outside of Cleveland's hot start has definitely been this Memphis team.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fun to watch by all means. All right, we'll keep it moving again. A reminder, if you haven't, more people popping in here. See Caleb and others doing their job in the chat. We appreciate you all. Hit that thumbs up button, please, and make sure you're subscribed here as well. I mentioned the betting Discord, and I'm just seeing here, Boss Man just put in his 3 picks for tonight. Ben Rasa earlier in the day. These guys are absolutely on fire. So you're not only getting top-notch DFS insight on the here with Rinpack and others, but if you sign up, and that link is right below here, for our premium betting Discord package, you're going to get daily picks from Buzzard, from Baker, from Rasa. All right. So all 3 of our top betting sharps up there are going to give you daily picks. And again, these guys are on fire. There's a cool community that you can be a part of as well. So we want you to be informed, but we also want you winning money. And that's basically it. So make sure you click that link below. And again, if you haven't already, hit the thumbs up button and make sure you're hanging with us and subscribe here, the Odd Shopper channel as well. So on the flip side with San Antonio, this is Zach Collins night, apparently, for a lot. Trey Jones and Zach Collins night. Are you buying into that? With a little sprinkle of Josh Richardson. How about that?
Yeah, I think these guys are fine to go to. And I like San Antonio a lot across the board. Zach Collins at one point came into the season with minutes just being a little restricted. That's thrown out the window. Looking at the situation here, and keep an eye on the starting lineup. They do not have Keldon Johnson today. No Devin Vassell, no Jakob Poeltl, no DeJounte Murray, obviously. We've known that. So guys who I think will be in the rotation for sure, Trey Jones, Zach Collins, Josh Richardson, Lonnie Walker, Josh Primo. And then the bench gets a little interesting. What the bench minutes look like is going to be tough to pinpoint. There is a Keita Bates-Diop. There's a Jock Landale. There's a Joe Wieskamp, I believe is how you say his last name. And then I believe we're also waiting on Romeo Langford being questionable. So this is what the rotation, they're still pretty, have enough bodies where Greg Popovich can really screw us over. But I feel the most confidence in Jones and Collins. I have a lot of interest in Lonnie Walker. I prefer Lonnie Walker to Josh Richardson. Okay. Just because of, I think, the savings and the ownership. And then I like taking some flyers on Primo and Keita Bates-Diop just because of the minutes. Yep. And Primo is a young player out of I forget where he played school, but he's I think he's one of the youngest players in the league. Alabama. Primo's not Alabama. So is Herb Jones, right? Herb Jones is Alabama, or
yeah. Did they play on the same team? Right? Yeah,
they might have. Yeah, but
because he just got drafted, Primo.
Yep.
So that's right. That was that Bama team.
And I know you hinted at Primo, and I want to be curious. Do you have any Primo 3+ props?
You heard my reaction. See, you and I have worked together long enough to where you know that there are 2 different reactions to what you say. There's the everything else reaction, and then there's the wait a second, you just said something that factors into a 3-point prop. So yeah, look, I don't know how to truly quantify this because he's only recently over the last 4 games seen this significant increase in minutes, at least from a consistent standpoint, right? So I will trend more towards there's going to be an increase of volume, especially tonight with so many guys here. But it's also hard to ignore that, 2 threes tonight is plus 126. So it's a decent number for a guy who normally doesn't shoot a ton. Now, this is the problem for me is that over the last 2 games, 1 of 4 and 0 of 1. Now, again, 0 for 1, that 25-minute game, 2 of 5, 2 of 6. I'm not worried about him making the 2 so much, Rinpack, as I'm worried about him having enough volume if he has an off night. 1 for 4 at 4 attempts tonight is not going to get it done for 2 makes, unless he's just on fire. But I don't like betting on fire. I'd rather bet the opposite with some sort of parachute.
Yeah, so I like Primo. I like Primo just because I think he's going to play as many minutes as Popovich wants him. He's one of the younger players on the team. He might not be in the playoff rotation. I don't think he will be, at least. So Primo, I like at that. I think you can definitely take your chances with Josh Primo. Expect him to play over 30 minutes, and he can shoot the three. That's one of the things that will help to nail a 3-point prop for sure.
Now, I just had this, and it dropped before I could even get to it because I had something else I was going to hit you with before Primo, but you let me in. So we're playing Primo. Is that the move right now? We're playing Primo over 1.5 at plus 126.
Yeah, I like it.
I'm tailing.
What's over 2.5? I'm curious.
Well, I can get you 3 threes here for Primo. It's going to be it's 440. You want to put a half unit on that?
Yeah, I don't
explode for 5 threes tonight. Oh, he's not even on there.
I don't know about 5 threes, but I don't mind him. I just think he's going to play so many minutes where he can find a way to get there, and I don't mind it. And I know the volume has been kind of up in the air, but there are guys missing on this team today. There is no Vassell. There is no Keldon Johnson. And I know he takes around 3 threes a game or something like that. It wouldn't shock me if he takes 5 attempts.
That's the big thing.
5 or 6 or even more. And I do think the minutes could be in the high 30s tonight for Primo. So could be.
This is what I did.
I'd be willing to take a risk with Primo. And usually I don't, but just because I think the minutes are not accounted for what the minutes could be tonight.
See, this is why I love building the tickets, because if you have like this gut feel, if you have this instinctual feel on it, then your track record would indicate that we should follow it. Right. So that's why, like, I'm looking at Primo. It's him and Wiggins. Those are the only 2 guys that I could bet on this one book that I'm looking at here. So this is what I did. I went the full unit plus 126 over 1.5. I'm going a full unit at plus 440 to go 3+. And then I put a half a unit to cap off the ladder. I put a half a unit on 4+ at 1420. Now, if that, again, if we're talking about significant increase in volume, then I think from that standpoint, it makes sense to cap the ladder at, a half a unit at most, maybe a quarter unit. That's fine there as well. But again, I'm going on what you said with volume for Primo. That's all. Yeah.
Not just volume. There are significant guys who are missing. And that's where I think the volume will come into play.
Got it. Okay.
I don't mind it. I think it'll be fun to see what ends up happening at the end of the day. But I do think the minutes can be anywhere. I think 30 is the minutes floor for Primo today.
Okay. Makes sense. By the way, I was looking at this for another play I was going to throw at you, a non-3-point play, by the way, and it dropped 15 points of value before I could even get you to it. But Zach Collins was plus 200 for a double-double tonight, which seemed like an absolute smash. And then I guess somebody else caught wind on that too. And it's still at 185, though, which is not a terrible number.
Yeah, with Zach Collins, I know I do think he'll play around 30 minutes. Yeah, the double, it seems a little bit of push. I just think things can get a little wonky with the front court rotation. Jock Landale could also play some. They have another guy in Devontae Kaycock, if I'm not mistaken, who could steal some minutes. So I would be a little cautious with Collins double-double. But I think it's a very solid DFS play, though. Yes,
and again, that's always good to distinguish so that people aren't like, man, Shander said play, and no. Bet's much different. You mentioned Lonnie Walker at 3,800 there. As far as somebody that you're looking to get to, I'm sure on Yahoo as well, these guys are going to jump up, from Jones and Richardson, other cheaper prices there. But even if it's like Bates Diop, somebody else that you can get to that's a cheaper cost option here on this slate.
Yeah, the one thing that I guess be cautious with Lonnie Walker is he's coming back from a back injury. But that being said, he's been dealing with this on and off back injury for over the past week or so. And I think if he's going to play, I like the minutes for him to be around 30. So, and he can get it going in 30 minutes for sure against this depleted Golden State team. So I like it just because of his price tag and kind of getting a lower ownership compared to Josh Richardson. I think they have similar ceilings. So give me the savings, give me the upside with Lonnie for DFS purposes. So awesome. I like Lonnie today.
All right, brother, let's keep it moving here. Also want to tell everybody, too, what's going on with Underdog. So this is what's up. Right now, nobody else is doing this. The fantasy contest that Underdog has going on. It's called The Dance, and it's open now until April 16th. So you have a little bit of time here, but you want to jump in right when the NBA playoffs start. So $200,000 total prizes, $30K awarded to first place. So you want to get in, draft your perfect team for the NBA playoffs. You pick players from who you think are going to make in the conference at NBA finals, and then you'll have a shot at winning big money by every time everything wraps up here for the playoffs. So go to underdogfantasy.com. You can download their app in the App Store. It's very simple. It's very easy. Most of you have already done that. If you haven't signed up, then do so and use our promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO, and Underdog will double. How about that? Your first deposit up to $100. So you put in $100, and then Underdog will double that. All you need is our promo code Awesemo. The dance, it's only $10. So think about that. You put in $100, we match $100. It's minus 10, and now you're in the dance. So download the app, try it out. $30K on the dance for Underdog. That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah.
We'll be coming in there winning all this money now.
I got to take a look at that format of obviously it seems a bit risky to draft now just because, like, wouldn't you want to draft when you know all the players? But you should sign up now for sure using the promo code.
Sure. But you want to hold off, right? I mean, you could enter any tournament early. That doesn't mean you put a dummy lineup or something, right? Like, that doesn't mean you're good to go 4 or 5 or a week ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious on what that format is looking like because, God, who knows? I mean, like, something fluky might happen and Zion Williamson might be in the conference finals. Who knows? I have no idea.
Could you imagine losing out on that? That would be a brutal way.
Yeah.
All right, brother.
The guys who'd like draft Zion Williamson in the last round are just dancing.
Yeah, right. And it's just like some crazy story. It's going to be populated all over Twitter. Oh, my goodness. All right, super chat here. Steve Case. Hey, gents, always love watching you two break it down. Upvote. Always appreciate you. What's the equation that Alex references sometimes in videos? 5x plus 5x plus 10. Do you know that?
Okay.
Yeah.
For example, I guess let's that equation's one of, like, I guess the original ways to look at when you're building lineups and kind of like going off the top of your head. So let's say, for example, player A is $10,000, right? And when Alex is saying 5x plus 10 is terms of like good fantasy points threshold where he becomes an okay play. So on this given day, can player A, who is priced at $10,000, get you 5 times X, which is his salary? So 5 times 10,000. So 5 times 10, which is 50, plus another 10, which would become 60. Can this player A give you 60 fantasy points? And I think that if he gets you 60 fantasy points, that's a pretty good play. That's the variable that I believe I'm pretty sure Alex is referencing in his video. So that's one. And then, obviously, I at one time when I was back in the day, like 4 years ago or so, that was a great threshold to look at. A lot of people have gotten away from it, but if people who are building by hand or building like on the subway, I think that's one of the best ways to, I guess, like look at it with a threshold on the top of your head. So let's say, for example, LeBron James at 10K, he's going to be a pretty good play at 10K most times than not. He can get you 60 fantasy points. So that is what Alex is referencing in that, based off that equation. Thanks for the super chat.
Yeah, really, Steve. Appreciate that. Always never necessary, but always appreciated by all means. Especially, look, if you have questions about what's going on, you see something like Steve does in a video and you want to further up or follow up, maybe just get some sort of clarity to it, then hit us up by all means. And exactly. See, Steve, letting you know that's exact. You nailed it, Renpack. See? Now, if only you can nail our 3-point props like you nailed that answer, we're going to be in great shape come tomorrow morning. All right. One more game. Or is there anything else? I mean, we scraped a lot here with the Spurs. You did mention Trey Jones and some guys here at the top. Anybody else? I mean, I feel like we went through their whole lineup, unless you want to make a play here for Jock Landale.
Long shot tournament options. I think he's fine to target.
Okay.
He's a
$10 on Yahoo.
Yeah, he's 3K. He has some upside off the bench, but he's also coming back from an injury. So I don't know if those minutes are going to be full, but I don't think it's all that necessary to go to him, where he's center only, where you really want him to put up mid 30s to make sure on a 3-game set you're fine with that. Actually, high 20s, he can do it, but it doesn't seem all that necessary. I feel like you can spend a center spot on other centers on the slate.
All right, let's look at Sacktown here. Plus 11.5. I mean, this is just a gigantic spread here. Clippers gearing up or not as far as Paul George, Norman Powell for the play-in scenario. So there's some motivation, if you will, just to get these guys out here and play. Stephen Leibowitz letting us know that Ingram GTD, still waiting on that news. Ja Morant, although he's trending. So again, we're 15 minutes away from handing the show over to Live Before Locks. So Greg, LaMarca, those guys going to have you covered by all means. Greg and Matt, I don't know. I don't want Matt to be like, hey, man, he's calling me by my last name and he's calling Greg by his first name. No. So Ehrenberg and LaMarca, how about that? Well,
there you go.
That I think sounds a little better anyway. That's like a comedy duo, isn't it?
Could be. Just don't give Greg those ideas, though.
No, well, okay. Good point. I don't want to put anything extra in his head. Dangerous. Sacramento. All right, look at the Kings. This is going to be tough again from the betting standpoint, but nobody's here for that. So this is now on you. Davion Mitchell, 7K right now, is catching the majority of our projected ownership. We do have Dante in there as well, DiVincenzo at 25 or so percent. So there is some maneuverability before you get into guys that are kind of like below 20. If it's Harrison Barnes, even Damian Jones, kind of similar price range at least. So you can get a little bit lower, but you're just not going to gain much leverage at all with these Kings guys. So unless you think that it's just the line is off and maybe the Clippers start resting and the Kings are not continuing to tank for whatever reason, maybe you can get to some people other than Mitchell.
We even got word that Alvin Gentry is going to lower this guy's minutes down the stretch of the season. So even then, I'm not that interested in Mitchell. He's going to need to perform at much higher fantasy production than he has. He's less than a point per minute guy at the moment, but he's a good defender. I just don't have much interest in anyone in Sacramento. It's kind of gross. I mean, the only guy, I think, because the center is kind of weak, you can take a flyer on Damian Jones for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, it's gross, really gross. And that's me being nice too. I don't think you can go to any of these guys with any sort of confidence. Personally, Damian Jones has upside. We haven't seen Harrison Barnes do anything of late. It's gross. I just think there are guys who are cheaper in salary that project better. I'd rather spend up to some of the guys in New Orleans than any of these guys.
That's a good point too, where we referenced that at the beginning, where you can definitely gain at least some good returns there with the Pelicans players, as opposed to just holding your breath here. How much of this is a minutes concern, right? With Mitchell, you mentioned that as far as trying, or at least getting word, who knows how much they're going to stick to it, that he's going to be reined in a little bit. I mean, are you expecting something similar for other guys, Barnes, Lyles, across the board?
I think you can expect all of those, the starters of Mitchell, Lyles, Damian Jones to play at least around 30 minutes. And then what happens with guys like DiVincenzo, Harrison Barnes, even Trey Lyles, his minutes have gone down a little bit of late. So I take back Lyles. What I said about Lyles, I just feel if you were to play starters here, the most confident starter for me is Damian Jones. And then it's Davion Mitchell just because he's going to play around. I expect him to get at least to 33 or 34 minutes, and he can do it on a small slate. So, but everyone else, man, it is tough to go to in any sort of conference. We're seeing guys like Jeremy Lamb get minutes, Justin Holiday get minutes, Josh Jackson get minutes, and it just reduces the ceiling on everyone else on the team. DiVincenzo is a guy who can get it going. He seems like the next guy who's been getting a decent amount of burn, and at the respective salaries across the board, DiVincenzo is a guy I'm willing to take a flyer on. Chimezie Metu is another guy who's been taking some minutes away from Lyles and playing some backup big. Sure, but there's guys in San Antonio who are priced better. It's just San Antonio is just trumping these guys at the moment.
Yeah, and I was even looking to see if there was anything we can get to here. Like, I don't want to touch these guys even from a betting standpoint, unless I could get like Metu somewhat. But even that, like, I don't even know if it's worth it.
Yeah, I'm not even sure. And I think we might even get one of their draft picks get minutes. The guy from Portugal, I think his name is Nimas Keita. He might even get some minutes, which might just like throw another wrench into everything. It's a really tough team to go to in confidence. And I think there are better options everywhere else where I'm like, I'll just stay away.
Yeah. Okay. Look, we will look one more time here at this game from the other side, from the Clippers, but Woozy, OMO, Davion Mitchell, or Draymond Green.
Oh God. I mean,
I saw that one and I was hoping for that reaction from you.
Davion Mitchell or Draymond Green. What? I wonder what
Now,
site.
Fueled by Vomit is saying Draymond, so I don't know if that helps you, but
I wonder what site that is because it's 7K on 7K, 6K. So it's like,
yeah, I mean, as far as DK is concerned here, for Draymond, I have him at 6K, right?
yeah, if he wants to follow up with a site, I think that would help me out a little bit more. But honestly, you could take Davion Mitchell at that point. I just think Davion Mitchell will have more opportunities to get more fantasy points. But I do prefer Davion by quite a bit. But there's a huge salary difference where I'm like, I think.
Well, is that 1,000? Is that 1K enough to mitigate what you're not going to get from Draymond versus spending up for Davion, knowing that there's at least a little bit higher of a ceiling?
Yeah, your lineup's going to be very unique. I don't think it's that necessary to leave
Okay.
$1,000 on this type of slate. That's a lot of money just leaving around. I know there's a ton of great spend down options, but
Yep.
I feel like you can upgrade if you put in Draymond. I feel like you can upgrade something else in your lineup.
By the way, FanDuel was the site. Real quick, bring back. He responded. Yeah. So I don't think that changes anything for you, but just to clarify.
No, yeah, because you can't even play them on the same position. So
correct. So I think it's more just about salary.
Yeah, maybe more starting out. Draymond, you can get a lot of steals and blocks. He's 6,200, but it is something. I mean, it's a tough choice either way. I still think I would take Davion. He projects a little bit better raw points wise, but Draymond on FanDuel, he can get you 5-6 stocks and really do some damage. But it's kind of a gross decision point, honestly.
All right. So speaking of FanDuel, by the way, Paul George, outside of Jordan Poole, who we're still kind of waiting for definitively at the very least, Paul George right now, 70.4% projected ownership. He's not as high, but almost 56% on DK. So with the Clippers getting in, and we'll talk about Powell, Reggie, and some other guys here on top of this, but let's just look at Paul George, how much you're getting to him compared to the field.
Yeah, Paul George looks awesome. And he just hasn't need to play like full minutes and he's just laying it down and getting the job done. It's 28, 29 minutes. And if for some reason this game stays close, we might see upwards of 30 minutes. Paul George, when he gets going, that shot is as pure as it gets. And PG-13, I know, did not get enough credit last year in the playoffs for just beating Utah in that game 7, winning. I think they won 2 games. No, they only won 1 game in the Western Conference Finals. But Paul George, it looks phenomenal. I think there's enough value to jam him in there. Looks great on all the sites. Can be the highest scoring player on the slate. Yeah, seems exceptional. And it seems pretty safe to go there in any cash game setting or even if you just want to play him. I think he looks phenomenal. I think a 50-point upside is definitely on the table. So getting that ceiling, getting the guy who's going to be one of the highest scoring players on the slate in the lineup seems pretty darn solid to me.
Yeah, and at 70%, you're okay with just being equal to the field there?
Yeah, I think that's completely fine. Just because he's pretty outstanding now. If we get some news beforehand that they're not playing, that's going to change some things. But yeah, there's enough value to get into Paul George, so I like him.
Now, Reggie Jackson is going to capture a little bit more, especially on FanDuel here. If you're looking there, if you're looking, let's say DK, it's going to be Reggie, of course, but Zubats now pops up a little bit. Marcus Morris at 4,800 on DK. So you do have some cheaper options, right? If it's at the center spot with Zubats, or if you're looking at trying to work in Marcus Morris at a 4,800 tag on DK at either the 3 or the 4, you do have some options where on this 3-game slate, there's a little bit of leverage for those two guys. I mean, they're not dominated as far as their ownership percentage.
Correct. And I think in long shot tournaments, you can definitely mix and match your Zubats or Hardenstein. Hardenstein has been shown to play exceptional fantasy basketball down the stretch. And this game could be an absolute route where Hardenstein gets some mop-up duty and just runs the show towards the end of the game. So Hardenstein is an option to go to. He's going to be very low owned, but he plays exceptional fantasy basketball when he's on the court. So he's not a priority by any means, but if you're willing to, I guess, drop a scenario where you play Hardenstein, he can get it done in 20, 23 minutes for sure.
Is Morris an option for you tonight at 4,800? And again, if he is, you could get, or at least a little bit of leverage there with that play. again as
Yeah,
a cheaper option?
I think he's like Zach Collins pivot. I think that's where
Okay.
you have to make that decision. And I just think Collins just seems much better to go to in terms of raw points upside. Marcus Morris would have to really have an outlier fantasy performance for me to go there in confidence. And I don't want to really get there with the field, honestly, with Marcus Morris at the moment. In the playoffs, I will be, but not at this moment.
Old Rat 14 on the super chat. Should I take the savings on Diop off Hartenstein?
Ketabate's, is it Ketabate? I wonder if it's Ketabate's job or Ketabate's Diop, but I do think Ketabate's KBD.
Yeah, KBD. Let's do that.
Yeah, KBD, I like. I think he might start and play a ton of minutes, and you got to take your chances with KBD. He might play upwards of 30-plus minutes. I think there were some Saturday slates where he started and played a ton of minutes. So at that salary, I don't mind going to KBD at all. I think he's will be pretty exciting to go to.
We have to mention Norman Powell at the very least here, right? And he's not gaining anything as far as steam on the ownership category. So if you did, even if you're building a bunch of lineups tonight, long shot tournament, as you gave a couple of options here, and he somehow puts up 15, 20 points in this game, you're going to explode because nobody else went to him. Of course, that's not likely.
I think Norm Powell, I think the minutes might go up a little bit. He's coming back from a foot injury. It's like he's priced, he's a shooting guard, has guard eligibility on DK. I still would prefer Trey Jones. So you got to look at this opportunity cost. You're probably missing out on Trey Jones if you're going there. You can definitely play both, but other guys around him, he'll be very low owned for sure. You'll definitely extremely low owned. So I think that's the only reason why you want to play Norm Powell. I just don't think the minutes are in full where you would like them to be to get that ceiling. So I would proceed with caution with Norm Powell.
Can we get 3 threes from Paul George, laying 115 tonight?
3 threes from Paul George.
I mean, if you look at the 4 games since he's been back, there's no doubt that he's going to have more volume than not. I know the last 2 games, not as much, but you reference, as far as minutes, not
3 threes is like pretty spot on.
Yeah.
The only concern is if this game is an absolute
slacking,
like Paul George might not get enough run, but now if you think the game's going to be close, sure. I think it's fine. It's not that exciting.
Do you think it's going to be close at 13? What is this line up to now? 13 and a half? Like, no,
I don't think so.
11 and a half. Pardon me. Didn't know if it moved.
I don't know. I don't think so.
I'm not excited about anything in this game on the Clippers side, but I'm just trying to defer to, like, Reggie Jackson. We can't play over 1.5 at minus 166. I think you're better off just playing 3 threes at plus 200. But again, I don't know. I don't know how long these guys are going to be out here. It doesn't even matter about George and Powell coming back from injury so much. It's just in general, especially if you're putting an ass whooping on this team.
Yeah. I think I'd stay away. I think I'd stay away just because of Vegas just thinks this game's going to be a waxing. And I think so too. Sacramento's pretty awful. And this Clippers team has been playing pretty well since Paul George has been back. And
right.
I think it's been impressive. And now they got Norm Powell back as well. So I would stay away.
All right, my friend. If you have any powers in the baseball world, please will JT Realmuto to hit a home run. So my Castellanos Realmuto same game home run parlay can cash. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. You already get a Nick Castellanos home run?
I already got that one in the first inning, my friend. Yes.
He was
I need JT.
Growing up in Michigan, everyone was super excited for Castellanos. He was like the only top prospect that they didn't trade when they were chasing all those World Series. So it's crazy that he's bounced around and got some fat contracts along the way too.
Absolutely, man. No, he is already beloved here by all means. It's amazing. Him and Schwarber, it's an opening day leadoff home run.
Is he playing the outfield now in Philly?
Today, Castellanos is he's DHing. So they're rotating Schwarber, Castellanos. The problem is that Mickey Moniak, their center fielder, is out for like 4 to 5 weeks with a broken or messed up hand. I think it's fractured is technically it. So they're still working the platoon out. But once Moniak's back, Harper in the field, Moniak in the field, and then one of the two.
Very
so
cool.
They're going to rotate. Yep.
How's the pitching rotation looking outside of Nola?
Zach Wheeler, if he's healthy, is one of the best in the game. So I love him. And I think right now, so much of this depends on two things. Kyle Gibson, who's out there now, their third starter, and this back end of the bullpen that they kind of beefed up a little bit, but everybody's holding their breath. Look, Phillies are a sneaky play. Everybody's on the Mets and everybody's on the Braves, that's all I'll say, man. All right. That's all I'll say.
I mean, if DeGrom and Scherzer are healthy, that's a tough one too, but that's a long season. Baseball is just such a long season.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Appreciate everybody hanging by all means with us. Please hit that thumbs up button if you haven't already. Live before lock coming your way right now with Greg and Matt. So don't go anywhere. Tyler's still here producing. Thank you, sir, for this hour. We appreciate you all hanging with us on the weekends, regular season, deeper dive. Enjoy the games.
What is going on, guys? It is, for me at least, my final NBA DFS show of the regular season that I'll be doing, joined by Matt LaMarca because it's a Saturday night and it's an interesting one. 3 games and most teams without much to play for. That's going to lead to some interesting decision-making. As of now, we just got word that Brandon Ingram isn't going to be playing, so we'll be hitting on that in a second. Matt, how you feeling about the final show that we're doing together for the regular season?
You know, I feel pretty good about it. I remember my uncle always used to say, like, anybody can go get drunk on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. Anyone can party on New Year's Eve. It takes a real talent to be able to do it on a consistent basis, and that's how I feel about this slate. This is not NBA opening night. This is not Christmas. This is a slate for the pros, the guys who put the work in. You know what I'm saying, Greg?
To me, it's a slate for the people like to turn up the random number on the optimizer and fantasy cruncher. That's the way I look at this slate, which there isn't anything wrong with that per se, but it's pretty difficult to predict some of these things because just going through what we're looking at, right here in terms of motivation for teams to play. New Orleans, not really that significant. Memphis, nothing to play for. Warriors, nothing to play for. Spurs, not really anything to play for. Kings, nothing to play for. Clippers, nothing to play for. So if any team does anything weird with the rotations, we can't be like, what the hell is this coach doing? Because it doesn't really matter. But that aside, I do think that there are some angles we could look at. There's going to be a bunch of value on the Spurs. And then, of course, we could talk about the news that we just got, which is that Brandon Ingram isn't going to be playing. First thoughts, what do you make of Ingram not in for the Pelicans?
Yeah, I think, this is a slate that we have some value, but the star power options are pretty lacking. Not very many players priced above like 8K. And one of the guys that is priced in that range is Ja Morant, who we don't know if he's going to play, if he's going to be limited, etc. So definitely the no Ingram news is a boost for CJ McCollum, and it's a boost for Jonas Valanciunas. Particularly Valanciunas, I think, is a nice option at 7,900. How many minutes those guys play, I don't know. Is it possible that they don't play a full workload? Sure. But as you alluded to, it's going to be hard to take a stance on anyone that you feel 100% confident is going to go out and play a huge workload tonight. So definitely boosts for Valanciunas and CJ in my eyes.
And here's the other point too, that it was something Adam and I talked about when we did the strategy show this morning. We need to get points somewhere. There's a lot of value potentially on the Warriors if Jordan Poole gets ruled out, and also already on the San Antonio Spurs, because the Spurs are sitting everybody for today. The Spurs injury report, Keldon Johnson, DeJounte Murray, Devin Vassell, Jakob Poeltl, these guys are all out. Romeo Langford is questionable. Typically, Langford doesn't matter, but he's another body to soak up minutes with all those guys that are out. And then, of course, not to mention that Doug McDermott, who started for a lot of the year for San Antonio, he is out for the season. So we're talking about, 5 of the leaders in minutes per game for San Antonio aren't going to be active. So now to sum it up, here's the point I'm about to make. We have the value now at this point. We don't have the guys to pay up for, and those guys are not walking through that door. They're not coming through like Willis Reed to show up because they don't exist on this slate. We had Joel Embiid, Joel Embiid and James Harden played earlier. Jordan Poole is questionable. Then you've got Paul George with, kind of questionable minutes. You could get in a situation where a Paul George who's priced over 9K scores 35 fantasy points. Could be enough to be optimal on a slate like this because you need to spend the rest of that salary somewhere. And the points just matter unless we're building lineups with tons of salary left on the table. So that's also why I look at some of these guys, Valanciunas, CJ McCollum getting usage bumps without Brandon Ingram in the mix. And for reference, CJ McCollum, 32.9% usage rate when Ingram's off the court this year, 26.9% for Valanciunas. These guys might only play 26 minutes. They might end up being optimal anyway. That's kind of how I know I kind of rambled for a little bit, but did that all follow to you, Matt?
Yeah, no, it's basically the exact same thing I said. It makes sense to me. The one big question I have from a motivation standpoint is the Warriors, right? They're the one team that you look at this slate and you're like, okay, if they win, they can keep the 3 seed. If they lose, then it's, they could drop back to the 4 seed. But is that something that the Warriors care about? I mean, my guess is no. I think the Warriors feel confident that if they have Steph Curry back, they can beat anyone, regardless of whatever seed they're coming from. So, another team that it's questionable motivation-wise, in my eyes at least. And now that you have Jordan Poole with this questionable designation, first off, I wouldn't be shocked if he just didn't play.
Yep.
But second of all, if he does play, I really doubt that he sees that normal workload that we've become accustomed to with Curry sideline. And Poole right now is projected for over 50% ownership.
Yeah. And also who I have Poole projected for more fantasy points than anybody else on this slate. And I think I have evidence as to why the Warriors don't care about this game. Klay Thompson is resting. If they cared and they're really trying to win, Klay Thompson would be playing. He isn't. Therefore, I assume that they don't really care. The other thing also is if you look at where the Warriors are at in the standings, a couple of points to be made here. They do have a half game lead on the Dallas Mavericks. You know who's not playing for the Dallas Mavericks tomorrow? Luka Doncic. So I also think this is a game the Warriors probably look at and say, the Spurs are resting everybody. We're resting some guys. I don't think Poole plays. I can't totally take him out of the projections just because of how important he is for this slate if he's in. So as of right now, in for me, but certainly prepared to make swaps. But I think there's a lot of mounting evidence that the Warriors do not care about this game.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, let's see. I want to address somebody in YouTube chat. By the way, if you guys have any questions, throw them in Discord, throw them in YouTube chat. We'll be answering more stuff than we normally would today, even if it's stuff that isn't super chats, just because I want to answer your guys' questions. A little bit of goodwill for me to finish out the year. That and, it's 3 games late. We don't have too many talking points. But Douglas Geely in the YouTube chat said that Valanciunas has only been playing low 20s minutes. Don't play him. Well, number one, he isn't always only playing low 20s minutes.
He's done that in the last 2 games that he's played, both of which have been blowouts.
Yeah. So the last game, the final score is 127-94. Okay. Didn't get his full run. Game before that against the Clippers, the final score is 100-119. And he also got hurt in that game. Does that mean that he's going to play 40 minutes today? No. Doesn't mean he's going to play 30 minutes? No. But it doesn't mean he's going to play 20 either. And the other thing also, another reason I think you have to consider Valanciunas today, you know who also might end up playing low 20s minutes? Every other pay-up option on the entire slate. So I think within the realm of expectations for today, McCollum and Valanciunas, both good pay-up options.
Yeah, Jonas is the guy that I have projected for the most fantasy points at the moment. If you just look, you want to talk about his past 2 games, that's fine. But the game log before that is riddled with, mid 40s, 50, even 60 fantasy points. He's averaged 1.39 DraftKings points per minute over the past month. That's one of the best marks on the slate. I mean, Paul George has been better, but pretty much outside of that, you're not going to find a better number than that. And again, now we're taking Brandon Ingram out of the equation. A lot of Valanciunas' best games came when Ingram was sidelined. So I think, again, on a slate where there's just not a ton of pay up options, he's the clear top one for me.
All right, so let's try to go a little bit position by position here. And any other news that pops up, any questions you guys have, we'll hit on those as well. But I want to ask you, how are you handling the Jordan Poole situation? Like I said, my gut feeling is that he doesn't play today. But with that in mind, he's so important to this slate if he ends up being in, that I'm using him as a placeholder anyway. I don't want to get to a spot where, 8 o'clock rolls around, Jordan Poole's rolled in, and I'm like, oh crap, I need to get Jordan Poole, but I already have a lot of lineup spots taken. So I am right now, I'm leaving Jordan Poole. And even though I lean towards him sitting, because I just don't know for sure, I'm not overly confident. How are you going to approach the Jordan Poole situation?
I'm definitely going to be underweight if he's in. I mean, again, we haven't projected right now for around 50% ownership. He's a guy whose salary just continues to rise. I mean, I believe it was last Saturday, we talked about him at 7,200 versus the Jazz. We liked him at that price tag, and he gave us 50 DraftKings points. Now that he's up to 8K, it's tough for me to see the upside if we're going to give him less than, 36 minutes or so. So I would rather spend the extra $200 for McCollum at this point. That's kind of where I'm at, especially considering the difference in ownership. I also think that there's a chance that this game versus the Spurs can get ugly. Not that Golden State has been beating anybody really without Steph Curry recently, but this Spurs roster right now is pretty gross.
Yeah, so I'm on the same page as you with half of that. I prefer McCollum to Jordan Poole right now. I feel good about that, but I find Jordan Poole still, even at 60% ownership on FanDuel and 50% ownership on Deke, I don't think that's ridiculous. I still think that's worth. I still think that's worth getting to Jordan Poole somewhere around the field in the crunches I run right now. I still do come in a little bit overweight to Poole, just from a standpoint of I don't know where the hell else I'm supposed to spend my salary.
No, it's fair, and for what it's worth, the Boom Bust tool does agree with you. It has Poole optimal at 57%. So he's still grading out with a positive leverage score despite the pretty astronomical ownership number.
So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to up the projection for Paul George a little bit and let me see how that changes things for me for Jordan Poole. Because maybe if I just force myself to a little more Paul George, it'll lower the ownership share on Jordan Poole a little bit, which it has. I'm looking at the crunches it's running, but I still end up even trying to downgrade Jordan Poole and upgrade Paul George. I still get to around 50% Jordan Poole. It's difficult for me to not be at least somewhere around where the field is at with them, because once again, there just isn't anywhere else to go with pay up options. But one thing that could change that is Ja Morant being questionable. Now, this is one that we should know, I assume, within the next, 15, 20 minutes, whether Ja Morant is in, because he is officially listed as questionable. He has not played in about a month. If he does go, I don't think he's going to play full minutes, but we've just talked about the minutes concerns we have with everybody else. If Ja Morant is in, which I would be just another guy we could add to the mix, and if he's going to play sub 20 minutes, different situation. But I think even if we're getting, 25, 26 from Morant, I think he's viable for this particular slate. How do you look at Morant and his situation as being listed questionable?
Yeah, I would definitely have some. It's hard to get excited about, a 10K player who I would probably have him projected for about 26 to 28 minutes if he does suit up. But again, with just the dynamics of this slate, that could be enough raw points to make him viable. So we're looking for ways to spend money. He's a way to spend money. And for what it's worth, the Grizzlies do have the top implied team total on the slate, 118 points. So the Grizzlies to me are the most interesting team right now, because I do think that if Ja comes back, they're not going to carry much ownership, especially considering it's only a 3-game slate, but they do still have pretty good offensive output as far as what Vegas is expecting. So they're a team that I think could be an interesting leverage spot today.
As an aside about the Memphis Grizzlies, have you seen the most recent Defensive Player of the Year odds? Jaren Jackson Jr. now second behind Marcus Smart. I find the Defensive Player of the Year market I find so confusing. It changes so much day to day based on nothing, and I just have no clue who's going to win that award. But I like to check on it because I have some futures on Bam that I think I have good value on, but don't feel great about him winning. But that aside, I look at that market every day. I'm like, what the hell is going on with this? We're like, Jaren Jackson Jr. wasn't in the picture, and now he's second, and Marcus Smart's minus 300. It's all over the place, but that's neither here nor there. We have a super chat from
Marcus
my
Smart
filler.
Isn't even the best defender on the Celtics.
Yeah, but Robert Williams is hurt, so that's just going to kind of that's what really changed Marcus Smart's odds. Is once Robert Williams got hurt, Marcus Smart's odds skyrocketed, and then it's just going to be hard for people to advocate for somebody who missed a lot of time, and then just recency bias for the missing games at the end of the year. But I agree with you. I think if it was to be a Celtics guy, it probably should be Robert Williams over Marcus Smart, but I don't think that's how the public views it right now. Our super chat here from my filler arc: Hartenstein or Damian Jones from Sacramento. I feel like backups like Hartenstein will get big run. I agree. I think that's a possibility. And then he also says World Championship indoor bowling, not a sport. I agree with you. Who do you think you are? I am Pete Weber, one of my all-time favorite, or one of my all-time. By the way, Pete Weber, is he related to you, Tyler?
How would Pete Weber be related to me?
I don't know. You just seem. I was driving yesterday, and I was at a stoplight, and there was a guy in a giant pickup truck wearing no clothes. And at least no shirt. I don't know what was on the bottom, but at least he wasn't wearing a shirt. He had a mullet, a mustache, and he had just a fat lip of dip in his mouth. I was like, that guy's related to Tyler somehow.
Yeah, no comment, Your Honor.
Anyway, Pete Weber.
Can I give you my take on sporting versus non-sporting events?
Oh, sure. This has been all the rage as of late.
If you can do it while drinking a beer, it's not a sport.
Oh, you could do anything drinking a beer.
Well,
you're just throwing NASCAR out like that?
So here's the thing. When I play golf, I'll drink beers. It's not a sport. When you watch these guys on the PGA Tour, it's a sport.
Yeah, the audience, I'm sure, is tired of me rehashing of me rehashing this, because this has been without as much stuff to talk about this week. This has come up every single day. What is or isn't a sport? So I don't want to rehash again. My personal opinion is that golf is not a sport. I don't think I need to discuss with a fourth different analyst. So I'll find a different slant, a different bit to run. But
all right,
the other thing too, I'm watching the Masters earlier, and they're talking about how the weather is going to be a big deal because it's 55 degrees, and like, oh my God, look, Scotty Scheffler's wearing a vest he has to take on and off. Like, how difficult is your sport if it's a massive hurdle that it's 55 degrees outside? A little silly. So anyway, as for his super chat, it was Hartenstein or Damian Jones from Sacramento. Who do we prefer? Let's see. Damian Jones or Hartenstein. And let's see. Damian Jones, or I have them very similar. I have a slight lean towards Damian Jones, but not by much. Let's see. What's the ownership difference between them? Damian Jones is right now projected for 23% ownership. Hartenstein projected for 14%. I'd lean towards Damian Jones. How about you? Damian Jones or Hartenstein, Matt?
I have Damian Jones with a edge of about 3 points. But considering the difference in salary, I think Hartenstein's a viable pivot. If I was just choosing straight up between the two, it would be Jones. But again, the difference is that I have Jones projected for around 30 minutes and Hartenstein for closer to 20. If you think that Hartenstein is going to see more minutes than usual in this game, he's the better per minute guy. I would give him a wider range of outcomes.
And by the way, while we're also talking about range of outcomes, somebody had thrown in the chat and said, up the randomness on this slate. Joking aside, totally serious about this. Yes, I think you should be building lineups with a slightly higher amount of randomness in Fantasy Cruncher, just because there's more randomness at this point in the season.
I agree with that. And I also like the idea of lowering your min salary requirement.
Yeah, I personally don't use a min salary requirement anyway. I just kind of let it rip because more often than not, you're going to get close to full salary on a lot of. If you're just running an optimizer, even with some randomness, you're not going to generally get, especially not for NBA. You're just not going to get lineups that have like $1,200 in salary left over. For this slate, even without there being without any kind of restrictions, just running it as is, like I still get lineups with over $1,000 left over in salary. Let's see, for DK, what is the most amount of salary that I have left on the table right now? I have a couple lineups that have close to $2,000 left on the salary on the table.
Okay,
I
wouldn't go much more than that, but I think that's totally viable.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing too is when you talk about the guys on this slate is we have pay up options of Ja Morant, Paul George, kind of it. Like there's no real expensive guys on this slate, so that also makes it a little bit easier to do. Let's talk about some of the other guards that are available to us today. So CJ McCollum, we're both on the same page as being a pretty high priority. Paul George, pretty high priority just because we're needing of guys to pay up for. I don't even think, even if we find out that Paul George is playing like 25 minutes, I still think that makes him a really strong option on the slate. We've talked about how the same thing goes for Ja Morant. When we start to get into the cheaper options at the position, who are the guys that stand out the most to you?
Really like Trey Jones at 5,400. I mean, nothing has changed about Trey Jones, but it just kind of feels like he's not garnering as much attention as he has been, right? We haven't projected for around 30% ownership. I'm sorry, 40% ownership. I'm going to have significantly more than that. I mean, we're talking 4 straight games now with at least 30 DraftKings points. And now we're removing more guys from the equation. No Keldon Johnson, no Devin Vassell. I think Trey Jones, as long as he gets his minutes, which is going to be the caveat for every player on this slate, I think 30 DraftKings points is pretty much a lock for him.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys out there. And I also, when it comes to the Spurs, do you have a maximum amount that you're willing to play in one lineup on this slate? I think this is different with it being a 3-game slate and them being just by far the best value spot right now.
Yeah, I mean, The answer is I haven't built any rules in. I'm always cognizant of trying to avoid having too much exposure to one team, but on a 3-game slate, that risk, like you alluded to, is kind of mitigated. So I would say I would just probably not be comfortable going with 5 more on more than just a handful of lineups. But if you want to play 4 Spurs, I think that's totally cool tonight.
We've got a super chat here from Jordan Metz. While there is no question in there, looks like he threw one in here saying, is Damian Jones a play on Underdog? So Underdog, which also does have props up on the site that you can play over-unders on. So that's something to check out. Also, another reason you guys should check out Underdog, they're sponsoring our show today. If you sign up at Underdog for the first time using the promo code Awesemo, you'll get double your initial deposit up to $100. They also are going to be launching really big fantasy basketball contests with the playoffs approaching. Right now, they have one with $200,000 in total prize pool and $30,000 award to first place. I really do like fantasy formats for the playoffs. It's a really fun strategy. You're trying to balance who the best scorers are with who you think are going to go deep into the playoffs and potentially make the finals. Another thing also that I like about it, particularly for this year, it's so wide open. It was last year as well, but this year there are so many teams that could potentially be in the finals, which I also think makes this contest really fun. So I want to ask you about that in a second. How many teams you think are actually live to make the finals? Because I think that's kind of an interesting talking point when it comes to that Underdog contest. But first, let's answer the Damian Jones question from Jordan Metz. He's saying, is Damian Jones a play on the Underdog projected for 15.1? 15.1 fantasy points, or is it 15 point?
I would imagine real points.
But why would it be 15? He must have made a typo. I meant 15.5. I'm pulling up Underdog right now, and I'm going to look at it to see.
So in Odds Shopper, we have
14.5 on my end for Damian Jones on Odds Shopper.
Okay, so 14.5 for Damian Jones. Let's see. How do I feel about that number? I think it's very accurate. 14.5.
Yeah, Odds Shopper has 13.7 points. So slight under, but not enough that I would feel comfortable betting it.
Yeah. If you have to take a side, I think going with the under makes sense, especially because any of these guys are, potential to play less minutes than normal in these games. But that wouldn't be my favorite prop to target there. By the way, we just got news that Jamal Murray unlikely to return for the playoffs. It did seem to be trending that way as of late.
Yep.
But now, before we hit on any more of the value plays for this slate, how many teams do you realistically think have a chance to make the finals? Or if you're playing this tournament Underdog, you're trying to win first place, you're trying to play, in a long-term playoff contest where you're trying to figure out which teams you might want to target. Which teams, starting with the Eastern Conference, do you think are live to make the finals?
So I'm going to go in the opposite direction. I'm going to start with the Western Conference because at this point, I would be very surprised if the Suns did not make it back to the finals.
Okay.
I think the Suns are just by far the best team in both conferences. I mean, they've been amazing this year. They've managed to win without Chris Paul. And when Chris Paul has been in the lineup, they've just been blowing teams out. First in record, first in net rating, etc. So I think if you wanted to find a alternative, I would consider probably the Warriors their biggest threat if Steph Curry comes back. I know that the Mavericks have gotten a little buzz with how they've played. Luka looking, he's basically played like an MVP over the past couple of months. But for me, it's the Suns in the West. The East is where the parity lies. I have the Bucks as my preferred choice to make it out. I think we're looking at a rematch there, but I think you can add the Celtics to that list of teams. They would need Robert Williams to come back, but it does sound like there's at least a possibility that happens. The Nets, it wouldn't shock me if they made it, despite the fact that they're going to have to come from the play-in tournament. And then I would say the 76ers are a notch below, but I'm never going to count out a team that has 2 top 15-ish NBA players. So I would say those 4. The Heat, maybe I'm just being biased because I look at the Heat and I don't see a true superstar. They're going to have they're not going to have the best player in a series for, most of their series in the postseason. And that's concerning to me. But certainly you can't discredit what they've done. If you wanted to be bullish on the Heat, I that's your call. I just don't see them as having the same ceiling as a team like the Bucks.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. The West, I'd be somewhat surprised if it isn't the Suns. I mean, like, there's still a ceiling with the Jazz. I know they haven't looked cohesive recently, but it wouldn't. The teams that I think have an actual chance to come out of the West, I would say, are the Suns, the Jazz, or the Warriors. The East, I'm going to go Heat, Bucks, Celtics, 76ers, and Nets, those five. The Nets being the highest variance team of the bunch, and who knows what's going to happen with Ben Simmons either. But either way, guys, check out that contest on Underdog. Signing up for the first time, use that promo code Awesemo. Could get up to $100 bonus on your first deposit. Let's answer some of the super chats here that have piled up while we were talking about that. First from D. Owens 89, Herbert Jones and Hartenstein, or Collins and Adams in a FanDuel GPP. So that is Herb Jones and Isaiah Hartenstein, or Zach Collins and Steven Adams.
Herb Jones and Hartenstein. I'm going to take the Steven Adams and Zach Collins side.
Yeah, so of the players you've mentioned there, I think Zach Collins is the best play by far.
Agreed.
And to me, I think if I was to rank these guys out, it would be Collins 1, Herb Jones 2, Adams 3, Hartenstein 4. So just given that information, I feel pretty good about Collins Adams, especially because Collins is such a good play. He's one of the best plays on this slate, and one of the value plays I think we should feel the best about with Jakob Poeltl out. Super chat from Aiden Jones. Thoughts on Wiggins for DK? Particularly if Jordan Poole is out and you're just trying to figure out where the hell is the usage going to go for Golden State. I don't know. There's been a single slate all year that I've been heavy on Andrew Wiggins. I think this is one, especially if Jordan Poole is out, it's going to be difficult for it to not be an Andrew Wiggins slate. How do you feel about Wiggins?
I honestly hope that Poole plays. I mean, again, we both don't think that's going to happen, but I like Wiggins even more if Poole is in, because I'm just not going to have to pay the same ownership cost. If Poole is out, Wiggins is going to become pretty chalky at 6,200, and Andrew Wiggins chalk is almost never good chalk, but certainly like his price has come down like over $1,000 over the past month. It's a good matchup. There's no Klay Thompson. There's not a lot to not like about Andrew Wiggins. So yes, I like him quite a bit.
All right, we've got news. Starting lineup for the Memphis Grizzlies. It is Steven Adams, Jaren Jackson Jr., Dillon Brooks, Desmond Bane, and Ja Morant. Morant making his return. We'll be talking about that in a second. Just want to really quick sum up the all the super chats we've gotten here, so we're caught up on them. Just one more to hit on from John Bryant. Top 4 Spurs tonight on DraftKings. And then he also says, thank you. Thank you, John. All right. Top 4 Spurs. All right, let's see. Which ones am I getting the most exposure to right now? All right, so the top 3 are pretty easy. Zach Collins, Trey Jones, and Lonnie Walker. Then it's a bunch of guys that are really close to me. I don't know there's another guy that I come in and I feel quite as good about as those ones. Like, I think for me, Josh Richardson, I think, is a reasonable answer, but I also think he's too, like, I don't think Josh Richardson should be 34% owned on DraftKings today. By default,
I think for me, it's Keita Bates' job.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with that. Like, by default, I think the answer is kind of Josh Richardson, but at the same time, I think he's too popular. So yeah, Collins, Jones, Lonnie Walker, Keita Bates' job. I'm cool with those being the 4 guys. And by the way, you could play 4 or 5 Spurs in the same lineup today. I don't think that it's particularly an issue for this slate. Now let's hit on the Memphis Grizzlies starting lineup. And obviously the important thing in here is that Ja Morant is going to be playing. He's going to be starting. What do you expect from a playing time perspective?
Yeah, 26 to 28 minutes, I think, is very reasonable. Ja has averaged 1.41 DraftKings points per minute this season. So that gives him a chance to get to, over 40 DraftKings points. And I think that's enough to make him viable. I would still rank Paul George ahead of him. If you're targeting one of these, superstars with questionable minute workloads, I would rather go with Paul George just because it's not his first game following an injury. And he has been really good since returning to the lineup, but certainly Ja is somebody that on a slate where we're not paying up and we're looking for salary. I think that getting exposure to him is warranted.
Yeah, I'm recrunching lineups, and I'm going to put, just in the interest of trying to get Ja into the player pool, I'm going to give him 28 minutes, maybe a little aggressive, but I just want to make sure I get some exposure there. That'll also maybe limit some of that Jordan Poole a touch. I'm also curious to see what the ownership projection ends up looking like here on Ja Morant. If he's going to be a somewhat relative to a 3-game slate, if he's going to be a contrarian option, that's pretty appealing. And as of right now, he's projected for 8% ownership on DraftKings, a lot more on FanDuel at 22%. Kind of a weird gap between the two. But if he's going to be 8% owned on DK, that is a number for sure to be overweight to, just based on the amount of value we have on the slate and the wide range of outcomes with Ja Morant's minutes. What do you make of him on DK at 8% ownership and then on FanDuel at 22.5?
Yeah, I would expect that DK number to come up, but I still think he's going to be contrarian for a 3-game slate. It's just going to be very hard for people to click his name tonight. So anybody who's not using, like an optimizer, not building 150 lineups or, multiple lineups, it's going to be very tough for them to click on that name. So I want to be overweight. I think that he'll probably check in closer to like 15% ownership when all is said and done, maybe even 20. And I can imagine myself having slightly above that.
Yeah, and I'm going to address something because we've got Dave DeRemer, who's, he's been watching our shows forever. He's saying Ja's a trap, don't do it. To an extent, I understand what you're saying. Here's my standpoint, though. We have Morant right now projected for 8% ownership, and we've got somebody saying like, hey, play Paul George over him, play CJ McCollum over him. In general, yes. If you're playing a cash game lineup today, don't play Ja Morant and play guys like Paul George and CJ McCollum. In tournaments, here is how I view this, though. I do not think that CJ McCollum outscores Ja Morant at an 8-1 clip. And that's what the ownership gap is between them. So that's what makes Morant a good play. It's not that I feel great about his minutes or his production after a month off. It's just that nobody's rostering, at least per our current ownership projections. If that changes when we get a fresh run, then my stance changes on it. But and we just got an ownership update, and it's still Morant's at 8% ownership. If he's going to be 8% owned, you should be overweight to the 8% number if you're playing a lot of lineups. That's just what I'm talking about it from the standpoint of.
Yeah, I mean, so just to put more context to that, we have Ja projected very marginally today. Like, we have him projected for 31 DraftKings points. I would definitely take the over on that, even if you're thinking, 24, 26 minutes. Like, he should be able to get more than 31. He still is showing up with an optimal lineup score of around 10%. So even with a projection that low, he's going to be optimal at roughly what we're projecting him for ownership wise. If you can see that he has upside for more, which obviously he has upside for more, then that optimal lineup score is only going to go up.
We have a question in our premium Discord channel from Mr. Moneybags. He's asking us if Jordan Poole is in. That's a big if right now, but we're just assuming for the sake of this, which do we like best? Poole and Draymond Green or Paul George and Otto Porter? Poole and Draymond Green, assuming Poole is in.
I'll take the other side. Okay. I like Paul George. I just think since we're not really concerned all that much about salary, I like his upside over Jordan Poole's, right? And I don't see a ton of difference between Draymond Green and Otto Porter. Green's a better player, but he is notorious for being worse without Steph Curry and without Klay Thompson, because he is not a guy who's going to see a usage bump. He feeds off of assists and rebounds and things like that. And having better teammates helps him in that department. And Otto Porter is playing comparable minutes. He's a comparable per minute producer. I like the Paul George side better.
All right, let's hit on the rest of the guard position. Now we've gotten news that Ja Morant is going to be starting. What do you make of the other guards we haven't talked about yet? Who else stands out to you? Point guard or shooting guard?
I think Reggie Jackson is fine at 6K, 6,100. I think Dylan Brooks is somebody I will have exposure to between the guard and forward spot. I think his ownership now will certainly be a little bit depressed because of the John news, but Dylan Brooks is a guy who's going to get his shots up regardless of who he's sharing the court with. Lonnie Walker, we talked about him with the Spurs. I think he's an elite play tonight. He has been really outstanding on a per minute basis recently, almost a DraftKings point per minute over the past month. And the door is now open for him to play more minutes than usual. And I will also give Gary Payton Jr. or the second. Is it the second? It's weird to me.
It's the mitten.
The mitten gets a shout out as well. Especially if Jordan Poole is out, then he vaults really towards the top of my value guard rankings.
So one other guy I want to throw out a contrarian option while we're talking about guards. I know on FanDuel he also has small forward eligibility, but Norman Powell, who came back from injury after a long layoff in the Clippers last game, played pretty limited minutes. We got, 22 minutes out of Norman Powell off the top of my head, maybe 22 and a half. It was 23 minutes from Norman Powell last game. He is currently projected for 4% ownership on DraftKings, and he is projected for 5% ownership on FanDuel. Now, once again, can we be super confident about the minutes for Norman Powell? Absolutely not. But the Clippers, what was it, 2 weeks ago, they said that they were going to have their guys on a minutes limit down the stretch of the season. Then Paul George came back and they took the minutes restrictions off. Now, why did they do that? I think because they wanted to get these guys reps playing together. Norman Powell looked pretty damn healthy to me last game. He played 23 minutes. He put up 24 points. He had a 29% usage rate. It was against the Suns' backups. A lot of it came in garbage time, but he was able to play, a somewhat substantial amount of minutes. I think they want to ramp him up so that he's ready to go for the play-in game. It is not out of the realm of possibility to me that we see close to 30 minutes from Norman Powell. And at no ownership on a small slate like this, we know he's somebody that is capable of scoring a lot of points in a hurry. We saw last game, 24 real-life points in 23 minutes. I think him at right around 4% ownership is a good flyer to take. How do you feel about that? And do you have any Norman Powell take of your own?
Yeah, I am a little bit more bearish on Powell just because I don't see him getting to 30 minutes or so. I think that would be kind of an extreme ramp up. If he gets to 26 minutes, though, can he pay off this salary? Yeah. So I don't have any Powell at the moment just because Trey Jones is only $100 more, and I have, a ton of Trey Jones, like 80% Trey Jones. But I think that Powell, you make an interesting case for him.
It's just an ownership play on a 3-game slate where a lot of the ownership is pretty concentrated. And if you're making your lineup, because I get it, we all like the same people today for good reason. Everybody wants to play CJ McCollum, Jordan Poole, Paul George, and then you're playing Spurs value guys. Cool. You know who else is doing that? Everybody. And I think just finding individual pieces you could throw into lineups to differentiate, because if you have Norman Powell in your lineup, it doesn't matter what other chalk you're playing. That is a unique lineup. Same kind of goes for John Moran on DraftKings right now. If you are playing Morant in one of your lineups, probably line up other people aren't playing. So I think just identifying a couple of low-owned options that the field isn't on, that will really make a difference. By the way, Morant's ownership just came up, and it's a different situation now. He is now 17% projected owned on DraftKings. And on FanDuel, he is now projected for 40% ownership. Totally different from what we talked about before. John Morant, no longer contrarian.
I still think 17%, again, is a number I'll be overweight on DraftKings. But 40% on FanDuel, I'll pass on that.
Yeah, 40% on FanDuel, that seems very aggressive to me. It's funny. It's funny how the ownership could change how I view things. Because before, the entire reason I'm liking John Moran is because I think he's a good way to differentiate lineups. And now he's a confirmed in, and it seems everybody's going to want to get to him. So different situation now. And now I tend to be more on the side of the YouTube chat where the risk probably isn't worth it when he's going to be that popular. Let's move on over to the forward position now. And I don't think there's nearly as many talking points as there are at guard. We got a super chat before about Andrew Wiggins. I think Wiggins is a pretty strong option, even if Jordan Poole plays. If he's out, Aaron Wiggins really becomes a no-brainer play, in my opinion. Zach Collins, I think, is the overall top cheap forward value on the slate. Who are the forwards that you currently get the most exposure to?
Wiggins for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I have some, again, Dylan Brooks. I like that he's got guard and forward eligibility. Marcus Morris is somebody that I have a solid handful of. Kind of the same line of thinking as you with Norm Powell, but Morris isn't coming off as extended of an injury absence. I have Otto Porter, a good bit of Otto Porter at 4,700. A little bit of Brandon Clark at 3,800. And then again, some KBD at the minimum.
Yeah, you mentioned Keita Bates-Diop before. I do think that he is a value option from the Spurs that's getting slept on a little bit. What's funny is, remember the last time we saw the same situation with the Spurs, Keita Bates-Diop was uber chalk in that game when they had a bunch of players out resting. He didn't perform well in that game, but now we've got a similar situation. It seems like nobody's really getting to Bates-Diop. I think there's a pretty good chance the Spurs have a bunch of guys that run out for like 25, 26 minutes. Keita Bates-Diop, particularly on DK, where he's the flat min at 3,000. I think it's a pretty good guy to look at. And right now, he is projected for 18% ownership. Compare that to somebody like a Josh Richardson at 4,600 is projected for 34% ownership. Too big of a gap between the two, in my opinion, because I don't think they should be projecting, all that differently. We have a question on our premium Discord channel from Fingers. He wants to know who are our favorite power forward plays besides Zach Collins. Also, how do you guys feel about Davion Mitchell? So Mitchell, the Kings came out and they said that they are going to dial back his minutes to close out the season. But what does that mean? He's consistently been playing over 40 minutes. He played 38 today. He still has had his minutes dialed back. He's really popular, I think, for a good reason. He's projected for 38% ownership on DraftKings. He's projected for 48% on FanDuel. That's all about reasonable to me. Mitchell's one of the better plays in like the upper mid-range price. So I think he's certainly worth getting there, but somewhere around where the field is at. As for the best power forward plays, I know that you mentioned some of your concerns with Draymond Green, Matt. I find him really hard to get away from on FanDuel because the power forward options are just pretty lacking over there. We've got Draymond Green at 6,200. Then there's Otto Porter also in the mix, Zach Collins. But then we got guys like Jaren Jackson Jr. I don't know how I feel about his playing time. Harrison Barnes. I like Herb Jones a little bit, but I think guys like Draymond Green, fairly strong play on both sides, but particularly on FanDuel, where he's just kind of unavoidable because there aren't other options. Who are the guys that you would say, let's say the three power forwards you think warrant the most exposure? To me, it's Collins, Draymond Green, Otto Porter, and then like Bates-Diop would be in the next tier.
I agree on Collins. I agree on Porter. I would rather have Marcus Morris at 52 than Draymond at 62 on FanDuel. Draymond's fine, right? I don't see a huge ceiling for him, I guess, is my issue, right? But that might not be as huge. Maybe I'm overlooking it on a 3-game slate where, him getting 35 points might be enough. But I just think the days of Draymond being a triple double threat, having that, 45, 50 point ceiling, those to me are a thing of the past. I think he's a guy who's going to get us around 30 fantasy points. And while that's good, it's not earth shattering value considering his price tag.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not earth shattering value. It's just there's a lack of options because it's a small slate and there are a lot of options, particularly guard. I mean, the guard is pretty stacked. Forward less so. There's guys, and then it's small forward like Dylan Brooks, Desmond Bane. I think these guys take a step back now that John Moran is in the mix. It's kind of difficult to outright fade them, but I don't have a ton of interest in Brooks and Bane with Morant back in the picture. He's a really high usage guy. Same goes for Jaren Jackson Jr. These are just guys that all lose out on opportunities with Morant back in the mix. So I guess that's one other talking point for forward before we move on is with a lot of these Grizzlies guys being forward eligible, the ones I just mentioned, Jaren Jackson Jr., Dylan Brooks, Desmond Bane, guys who played a whole bunch when Morant was out. How do you feel about them now that Morant is going to be returning to the picture?
I'm still trying to force Grizzlies into my builds. If that means I have to like manually up their projections or their ownership, I think they're a team that you still want to get some exposure to because, again, they have a 118-point implied team total. That's tied for the highest mark on the slate. And we're not expecting John Morant to play a full workload. That still leaves plenty of points for the supporting cast. So, again, like I think Jaren Jackson, he's 6,600 on FanDuel compared to Draymond being 62. I think that Jaren Jackson's upside is astronomically higher than Draymond's at only $400 extra.
I don't think it's unreasonable to say. I could see there being more upside in Jaren Jackson. I can't even say there's more downside.
There probably is, but that's not a big deal to me.
Yeah. Maybe I'm a little too light on Jaren Jackson. I still have Draymond projected higher. The other thing to consider too is that if Jordan Poole is out, I think that we're going to see Draymond really have to have the ball in his hands a ton and facilitate a lot of the offense. And it's a really easy matchup against the Spurs with a lot of guys out.
I just don't know if that matters, right? Like, what you think he's just going to hand out 15 assists on backdoor cuts? Like, he needs guys to knock down shots, right? That's why Draymond's been so good, is he plays with shooters that can pay off his assists.
I feel you. Actually, you know what's funny? I think I can make a good case for Jaren Jackson over Draymond Green, maybe on FanDuel, but Draymond Green over Jaren Jackson on DK, just because of the defensive stat bonus.
Okay.
Now I feel like I'm fence sitting, but it's kind of how I feel the more I think about it.
I will firmly take Jaren Jackson over Draymond tonight. I'm willing. If anybody wants side action on that, hit me up on Twitter at Matt LaMarca.
All right, there we go. He's trying to get some extra bucks in his. By the way, they're gonna have to do it pretty quick because that game starts in 9 minutes. But that aside, Matt is throwing down the gauntlet. The offer is on the table. Another offer that is currently on the table: the Awesemo MVP program. You guys could sign up for it by texting 1-660-656-4417. Text MVP to that number to get in on our MVP program. They'll get you access to beta testing some new tools and also get you access to unique new deals that we have. Like right now, we do have a 50% off Awesemo Plus weekly pass discount, but only for those who are in the MVP program. Once again, to sign up for the MVP program, text MVP to 1-660-656-4417. That information is also in the description box below if you are a normal human that does not remember phone numbers as soon as you hear them. All right, let's move on to the center position now, Matt. And we have sung the virtues of Jonas Valanciunas, but that was way back at the top of the show. So maybe some people who weren't watching then didn't hear what we had to say about him when Brandon Ingram was rolled out. I think Jonas Valanciunas is the best overall center play on this slate because without Ingram in the mix, we've seen a pretty substantial usage increase for him. The minutes could be a concern, but that's kind of uniform across the board. So I look at Valanciunas as a really good center option. Are you still there?
So yes. And here's what I will say. I will have one Pelican center in almost every lineup tonight. I'm going to have a ton of Jonas Valanciunas, and in lineups where I don't have him, I'm going to pivot to Willy Hernangomez, because I think the only scenario where Valanciunas isn't one of the highest scoring players on this slate is he just doesn't get the minutes. And if he doesn't get the minutes, I think they go to Hernangomez, and we've seen what Hernangomez does with increased playing time. So to me, there are two real routes you can go with. You can be overweight on Jonas, or you can be overweight on Hernangomez, or the third route, which I think is the preferred route, is just be overweight on both.
Yeah, so Hernangomez, let's see. Where is old Willie? He's projected for no ownership. You want to get different today, you play Hernangomez, you're different. FanDuel, I don't think you can say. He's 5,700 on FanDuel.
Can't play him on FanDuel, but on DraftKings, he's played 25 plus minutes the last two games. He's had at least 34 and a half DraftKings points in both games. So if you want to tell me that you don't like Jonas tonight because you don't think he's going to get the playing time, then you should 100% be playing Willy Hernangomez.
0.1, actually, I really like that as a contrarian option. 0.1% ownership on DK. There's certainly a world where they each play 24 minutes. And Hernangomez in 24 minutes, pretty good fantasy producer, 3,900. We could play multiple centers on DK. I don't mind that shout out. I like my Norman Powell call a little bit more, but I could get on board with that. Here's another one though. Also, I want to throw at you, kind of some similar logic. We don't know what to make of the Memphis Grizzlies. Brandon Clark, as is, he's already a guy who's part of the rotation, right? Clark gets some minutes, but if the Grizzlies are going to go out and play some of their starters slightly limited minutes, I think Clark is the guy who stands to benefit the most. 3,800, he's projected for 4% ownership on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel at 4,200, he's projected for 6% ownership. That is my big man contrarian play. I think it's for a lot of the same reasons as Willy Hernangomez, but I think that the minutes for Clark are maybe a little bit more secure. Sure. Clark, that is going to be my forward contrarian play. How do you feel about the Clark shout out?
Yeah, I gave him a quick shout when we were talking forwards. I have Brandon Clark in my player pool tonight. You said it perfectly. He's in the rotation to begin with. He's a good fantasy per minute producer, 1.12 DraftKings points per minute this season. And with minutes being such a, wild card tonight, I think throwing shots at guys who are excellent per minute producers, but the minute workload is questionable, it makes a ton of sense, right? The minute workload for everybody is questionable tonight. So play the guys who are good per minute guys.
Yep. And Brandon Clark. The other thing too, Clark could play his regular minutes and still be a factor on the slate. He's a really good fantasy producer. Yes. So he doesn't have to do anything out of the ordinary or anything crazy. And he could end up having himself a good night. So that's the other thing too, that I'm going to just kind of say to put a little bit of a stake of claim behind Brandon Clark, is that I do like him as a contrarian play here. I think there's multiple avenues that he could get there. Working through the rest of the center position, Zach Collins, pretty obvious play. Jonas Valanciunas, we've talked about him. Damian Jones, we answered super chats about him at the top of the show. What else at the center spot do you want to talk about?
Not much. I think if you wanted to go contrarian with the Spurs, you could maybe throw Jock Landale in the mix as well. He won't get nearly as much ownership as Collins, but you never know what Popovich is going to do with his centers. We've seen, nights where Pirtle sits and Landale plays, a nice handful of minutes. So I wouldn't hate that if you're looking to go contrarian, but I think center of all the spots on this slate is the one where I am playing the smallest handful of players tonight.
Yeah, I think we look at the center position, and like I said, other than guys you're taking flyers on, I think the guys to be heavy on, it's Collins, Valanciunas, Damian Jones to an extent. That's kind of it, though. There's not that many guys I feel super confident at the center position. Then obviously also playing on FanDuel, can only roster one of them. Steven Adams, another guy I kind of just view as a flyer, mostly because he's priced somewhat significantly. He's $5,500 on FanDuel. On DK, Steven Adams is also $5,500. He's not the highest upside player, and just considering the amount of value we have on the slate, I don't think he's all that necessary. We got some super chats about him earlier. If you absolutely need to play him in a lineup, it's not an issue, but not a priority for me either. So that's kind of it with me when it comes to the center position. By the way, guys, we only have a couple minutes left in the show. Do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, because I haven't asked for likes in a few minutes. Also, this is going to be my last NBA regular season DFS show. What difference does it make? I'll be back talking about playoff basketball next week. It'll be much more team talking about playoff basketball, because teams aren't just going to be ruling players out or randomly limiting their minutes in playoff scenarios. But don't forget that baseball DFS is here. And if you guys are looking to play MLB DFS, you could celebrate the return of baseball with a $1 MLB Weekly Express Pass. Just when you're signing out over at Awesemo.com, signing up for the package, use the promo code FASTBALL. Easy to remember, FASTBALL, FASTBALL. And that offer is going to be available until April 11th. So if we're going to sign up to it in the next couple of days, and that'll be $1 for an MLB Weekly Express Pass. Matt, we're reaching the end of the show here, approaching lock. Any final words you have for the audience?
I've had a great time with y'all this season. I'm assuming I'll be back for the playoffs, but you never know. And, not to take a dark turn, but right, like when stuff like what happens to Dwayne Haskins, an absolute tragedy today happens. I think it's important to just remember to be thankful for what you have. So I'm thankful for all of you who tune in. Greg, Tyler, I'm thankful for getting to work with you all. And I'll be doing some baseball, so you'll still see me there at a minimum. But let's have a good playoffs. Let's have some fun.
Yep, I enjoyed working with Matt every Saturday. I'm thankful for him and his volleyball prowess. I am thankful for the audience. I'm thankful for Tyler Xander. And of course, I'm thankful for my future president, yours, Eric McPherson, EMAC 2024.
Yeah,
guys, have a good rest of the weekend. I'll see you back here in a couple days.